The advice and opinions expressed by Dr. Granpeesheh and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen. Good morning and welcome to Ask Dr. Doreen. I'm Shannon Penrod and I am here with the fabulous Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Good morning. Good morning.
I always think that I can't love you more, but I do.
Shannon, I love you. Thank you. It's so nice to be here.
Well, it's nice to be here with you, and I want to thank our audience for sticking with us. We've been on and off a little bit the last couple of weeks. We are welcoming one of the most fabulous people on the face of the planet as our new content creator and producer for this show, Chris Desmond, who's just been amazing. And
he has. It's lovely to have him here.
Oh my gosh, so lovely. So thank you, Chris. And if you're watching, it's because Chris is on the job. And thank you for finding us in different places than you've ever found us before. And stick with us. We got so much fun stuff coming up. But we're here today with Dr. Granpeesheh. If you don't know her, she's a true expert in the field of autism. She donates this hour every week, or as many weeks as she possibly can, because sometimes we can't have you.
Sometimes we're traveling.
Yeah. If you're on a plane, we can't put you in. But even we've had you be in Saudi Arabia in a hotel, and
that's true. That's true. I did a show from there.
Anytime that she can, she will be with us. But there are some times when we can't. But it's so wonderful because what happens is people get to write in questions from all over the world to ask you questions. And you give them your wonderful support and things that you know. We do like to remind everybody at the start of the show that there is no expert in any field who could give individual specific advice in this format because you don't have eyes on the actual situation, which is what it would require to give a responsible answer. So just know she can't do that, but what she can do is talk to you about what questions to ask your experts. She can ask you questions and then give you a general base of knowledge, which we know helps. We got a great email yesterday.
Oh, that was so lovely, yeah.
Yeah, we love it when you guys write and check in with us and tell us, you know, the advice that Dr. Granpeesheh has given you, what has happened in the interim. We got a wonderful letter from someone talking about how much progress had happened in the last year because they'd gotten some bad advice about ABA, and then they listened to you and I and went, I think I need to go look at the research.
Yeah.
And then, and how much progress their kiddo has made. So we love that. We love updates. I've been loving all the updates from parents writing. We have one parent still who's in the trenches working to get that one-on-one aid, and they have not capitulated yet, and you know who you are, but I think it's coming because everybody else got their aid, and that makes me so happy.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That makes me thrilled.
Yeah, very, very good.
But anyway, good morning. We're saying good morning to Andrea. So good morning to all of you. If you're watching, a couple of things you should know. We're live right now on Facebook, on YouTube, and Twitter. We will podcast later on to all the places that we podcast, wherever you get podcasts. We're a free download. We hope that you'll subscribe to this podcast. Now, this podcast is its own podcast now. Ask Dr. Doreen is its own entity separate from Autism Live now. You need right now to subscribe to Ask Dr. Doreen, the podcast.
Right.
Because any minute now, we're going to be shutting it off. Right now, you've enjoyed that if you subscribe to Autism Live, you were getting Autism Live and Ask Dr. Doreen. And it's free either way, guys. That doesn't cost you anything to subscribe, but you need to subscribe to both because we need to be able to send you the content, and Chris is showing you some of the different places that you can find the podcast, but you need to subscribe so that we can send you content.
Right.
You can ignore the content if you choose to, but we want to be able to send you, we've got some really amazing things coming up and more content that we're creating, so I hope that you will subscribe now as opposed to late. Yes, thank you so much. Anyway, I do want to encourage you that when you send in a question, and we want you to be sending in questions right now while we're live if you're watching. We've already, Andrea is watching us on YouTube. I want to hear who's watching on Facebook. Send us questions, be as specific as you possibly can. It also helps if you tell us where in the world that you are watching, because it helps us both to know resources in that area.
Absolutely.
I've been amazed sometimes. Somebody will write in and say, oh, I'm in New Zealand and I don't know. And you say, oh, call so-and-so. And I'm always like, look at that. Look at
I know
that.
a lot of people all over the world in
Right,
this field. Yeah.
right. So it helps when we know where. I love that Andrea, I wasn't going to out you because I didn't know if it was okay, but Andrea is admitting that it's her letter that we got yesterday. Andrea, that made us so happy. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, that was beautiful.
Beautiful letter, and it was amazing. There were two things that happened yesterday that actually there were like four things really, but I got your letter, and then I saw something that Logan Shepherd's mom posted that absolutely jazzed me for the rest of the day.
It was so cute.
Of
Oh
her
my
son
gosh.
leaving to go to tour Europe and him, dancing in joy and waving to her. Like the best possible circumstance that you could ever be in, your child being joyful, walking away from you. It touched my heart so deeply, rearranged what I want to have happen in my life, because I always think, I don't want him to leave, I don't want him to leave.
Yeah.
And yesterday I let go of that a little bit and said,
That's awesome.
I can't wait for him to walk away from me joyfully.
Right,
And that's huge. I'm still emotional about it, but
Yeah.
huge, huge, huge. So amazing. And then I also got to meet with some parents last night that were just, especially some dads,
Yeah.
who were
Yeah.
just, they're trying really hard to have the best things in the world happen for their kids, and I was very moved by that.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I mean, I showed you a text about a dad that I'm working with, and
Yes.
it's really, really difficult. Some, men especially put on such a strong look,
yes.
or face, and we forget how fragile they are and how hurt they might be inside, or scared, or
Yes.
just worried.
All of the above,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But there was one dad in particular last night who said, I think my wife and I have realized recently that the big thing is to learn everything and he was, referring to the people in the center. He was like, we need to learn everything that's our best course of action. And I said, oh, you've got the keys to the kingdom now.
Yeah.
Like that, when you
Yeah.
realize that that's the thing. I remember the early days when, I was of the mindset of, here's my kid. Once I realized that you guys were great and that you knew what you were doing, because I had to get through that hoop first, right? But once I realized you knew what you were doing, I was like, here's my kid, solve it for me, what's going on, and I'll come back in when you've solved it. And of course, that wasn't the ticket.
Right.
I needed to learn.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not an easy process
No.
either. I mean, it's not a quick fix either. It's a period of time, and it's hard to do all the work that needs to be done. But we do our best, and a lot of parents do get involved and continue to persist, and it pays off.
Yes, absolutely. I'm a little mystified because Andrea wrote in and said, I want my son to be able to go to typical developing preschool next year and ABA. I called the school system and they told me they will not support putting in the IEP that he needs an RBT from his center. Is this legal? Lots of questions there,
Yeah,
and lots of nuances.
I don't know if they're allowed to prevent you from having an RBT with him at school. This is preschool too. That's a whole different thing, because you're not even in the school system yet. It's like that starts with kindergarten. So I'm not sure. This is, I guess, a question for Bonnie.
Well, and I've sat with Bonnie for so many of these conversations that I would love to get her words on it too. But what I know is that there is this dicey little thing that in IEPs that they can say to you, we don't have to specify who a provider is, and we don't have to let people into our school. They can take that tack. But I will tell you that the opposite is equally true. Many people have gotten an RBT from their center written into their IEP, so there is a way around this.
Yeah, and again, I don't know if this even applies to preschool. Like, preschool is a little bit different, because I don't think, I mean, it depends if this is a preschool that's funded by the public school system.
Exactly.
And that's really the question.
Yeah, but here's the thing. You have access to me. Email me. Let's get it sorted out. Let's work the steps on it. That's what I've been doing with a lot of parents about getting an aide in the classroom. Happy to do that.
Yeah.
As I said, we've had wild amount of success with that. there's my email, because look at how good Chris is. On the screen, Shannon at autism-live.com. For those of you who are listening in podcast, you can always get a hold of me there and we can talk it out. And sometimes it takes me a while to get back to you guys. I got a really long email over the weekend. If that person is watching, I'm reading it. Hey, we're saying hi to Laurie. So thrilled that you found us, because I know you were having some issues with that. But you found us. Now you know where we are. Okay, I have to talk a little bit about our topic today, which is help. My child has rigid routines.
Oh, right.
And it is affecting the whole family.
Yeah.
That's our starter topic for today, although we'll entertain questions about anything. But I'm going to jump in with this first question. Which is, please help. My child has a routine that has to be followed before we can leave the house. There are like 14 steps to it, and if you interrupt him, he has to go back to the beginning. It is the cause of so many arguments with my husband and my other children. We can never just leave. It is always a dysfunctional nightmare. My husband wants to just pick him up and put him in the car. Routine be damned. We have tried that, but the whole rest of the day is a nightmare. So I always defend the routine and try to get everyone to comply. The rest of the family doesn't agree. Please help. He is 10.
Yeah. So let's talk about what routines actually are. And basically, it's really interesting because I remember when I was a student and we used to talk about these routines under the category of self-stimulatory behavior or ritualistic behaviors, and you don't really, it's a very different point of view when you look at it as just a ritualistic behavior of an individual with autism as opposed to an obsessive compulsive behavior, and if you look at the kind of topography or how they look, they're exactly the same thing. And especially routines, when it's a routine of like specific 14 steps, that is an obsessive compulsive. It's a compulsion.
Yeah.
That's what they are. They're compulsions. And what causes compulsions are very specifically, okay, so in OCD, the obsession, which is the thought, is so overwhelming that you do a compulsion in order to calm the obsession, right? So like, for instance, you obsess over the thought that there are germs everywhere, and then the compulsion is to wash your hands repeatedly because it's the only thing that will temporarily calm that obsession, right?
Yeah.
So with routines, it's something that we are trying to do to reduce an anxiety-provoking thought. And it's really hard to know. Maybe it's interesting because in this case, the child is doing this whenever you have to leave the house. So it's likely that leaving the house produces some sort of compulsion, some sort of anxiety or fear or something that he then starts to get worked up about. And then by doing this compulsive type of thing, it gives him a little bit of calm.
Yeah.
So there are two ways to deal with this. One is literally to do what your husband says, and it'll be difficult for him, if not, it'll be very
horrible.
It'll be
It's gonna
horrible. But he will eventually. What'll actually probably happen is that he will develop some other type of compulsive behavior, maybe in the car or outside, that will help compensate for that, because these compulsions are calming. So that's one way. I don't know that I recommend that way, especially because he's 10, which means that he has been doing that for quite a while.
Yeah.
What I recommend is that you actually see a psychiatrist and try to get some help for the anxiety. And a lot of times the help for the anxiety is in the form of medication. And the medications that help anxiety are the same ones that help depression. They are serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Now we have all varieties. We have norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors, etc. But it's basically an antidepressant, an anti-anxiety medication that will help him calm himself a little bit. That will just take the edge off. The obsession will get less in his mind, so then the compulsion, the need for the compulsion gets less. The other thing is obviously, depending on his level of functioning, you can also do cognitive behavior therapy, which are like exercises that help him reduce his own obsessive types of thoughts, exercises that help him reduce his own compulsions. But a lot of that really has to do with how he's processing, how much you can interact with him, how much you can sit down and explain to him what is actually going on, talk to him. Does he understand if you can sit with him and calm him down in other ways and using other words, right? So I really don't know him, so I don't know if that's something you can do, because basically the most successful treatments for OCD or obsessive compulsive behaviors are a combination of the two, sort of cognitive behavior therapy as well as medication. Now, if you are pretty clear, if you ever get to a point where you're pretty clear that the anxiety, anxiety and phobia are pretty close, right? Phobia is something that, a severe fear of something, and anxiety is kind of an apprehension of something fearful coming. So if you can identify what the anxiety is related to, in other words, is it related to going outside? Maybe there's more noise outside. Maybe there's more unpredictable stuff outside. Whatever the anxiety is, the core of it is related to, then you can also work on trying to teach your child how to deal with those things. Let's say a child might have a lot of anxiety about, let's say, going outside than just the sensory input that's outside, noise. And if you allow them to use a noise-canceling headphones, that might reduce the anxiety, and then in turn that might reduce the need for the compulsive behavior. So there's all of these types of things. I hope those thoughts are helpful. Also know that compulsive behaviors, even after the anxiety's gone, compulsive behaviors can become habits, and you kind of have to gradually reduce them. Yeah. So that's another whole aspect to it. But I would really, if it was my child, I would start with medication, because these medications really significantly help the child. They just help the child calm down a little bit,
Yeah. And the other thing that I read into it is that I hope that this family has the services of an LMFT or something like that, because I think it's unrealistic. I'm not sure, because I've never had a child, that was born and developed neurotypically. And I've only ever had the one child. But I suspect that it's with all parenting that it's very hard to be on the same page about parenting every day.
Yeah.
Like for any parents, right? But then add in that, your child isn't doing things the way you expected. And then you have other people, a committee of people that are saying things as well. I think that that's a lot, and I don't see how without help that it absolutely can cause rifts between other children and your spouse and whatever. And I think if we just accept that that's hard and maybe you need some support in that area.
Yeah,
everybody has to agree to go, and that's a whole other Oprah, right? But even if, some of you will write and say, I can't get my wife to go, or I can't get my husband to go, or whatever. But I think if that's the case, even if you go, so that you have a safe place where you can sit with someone who doesn't have a dog in the fight and say, sometimes I'm angry at my husband or my circumstances or whatever, and because I feel like that stuff bottles up, and it's not good. So
no, I agree, and thank you for kind of talking about that whole side of it, right? Which is. And it becomes a family issue. It definitely does. And you have to also pay attention to the other siblings and what this is doing for them, right? Yeah. That it almost starts to become punitive for them to go out.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, oh, here we go again. Every time we want to go out, something like this happens. And that will cause all kinds of issues in the whole family dynamic and structure. And so it is important to deal with. It's one of those things where, because it only happens when you're going out, and it's sort of, you can consider it to be harmless in the sense that it's just a ritual of different things. we don't deal with it. We're like, it's not a big deal. Let me pick my battles.
Yeah.
But it is kind of a big deal in the sense that it interferes with the whole family structure and the whole plans of the family and your schedule and all that sort of stuff. I'd really, like, the clinician in me is like, please let us know the 14 steps.
Yeah.
Because depending on what they are, you might be able to also shape this backwards and, like, kind of have the last step happen in the car. So there are ways that you can do this, but honestly, the biggest help is going to be if you can deal with the anxiety. It's not so much
Amen to that.
routine, it's the anxiety that you need to deal with.
Amen to that. I want to say a special welcome, because we haven't had you for a little while, to Cameron's, where I've lost it now, Cameron's Journey, who's with us, because I wanted to say that I saw your post the other day, and I know you got some stuff that you're facing, and I'm just sending you hugs and wanting to know that you've got some support as you go through your recovery. So sending you that hug and that energy. I also want to say thank you to Autism Journey with Elijah for reconnecting and posting in all those groups to let them know where that they can watch us. Thank you. Appreciate you more than you could possibly ever know.
Did you see Kylie's?
I see
question?
Kylie's now. Kylie has written in and said, my child is echoing one-word phrases if we verbally prompt and she wants something. How do I increase language from this point? That's a pretty common thing, right?
Yeah, it's awesome that she's doing that, and that's fabulous. If the first, well, you have to go in two directions. You have to fade out the prompting so that this is called manding, right? Manding is when we request things that we want. So if you can start to fade out the prompt so that she will, or he, I don't know why I thought, she, if she begins to, so that she can just spontaneously request things. So that's important. And you also are, I think you said phrases. So I want, is great that she's doing that. The next typical phase of language is what we call tacting. And tacting is when you label objects, but not objects that you necessarily want. So, and that's a new phrase. And initially it would just be labels. And so, in therapy, when we're doing ABA, when we're doing discrete trial or any kind of ABA, the next phase is just to teach the child a whole lot of labels, which obviously your child has some of them. Those are the labels of objects that your child wants, but then there are labels of objects that are just in the environment, right? So I don't know if you have someone who has been actually teaching labels of objects, what we call just object labels, right? So, pen, cup, bottle, etc. And then so those are just initially we would teach them as having the child either point to them, touch them, give them, so in receptive formats. And then obviously the next phase is to ask the child, what is it? And the child would just say the object label, and then gradually that becomes the second phrase, which is, it is pen, it is cup, it is so on. And those object labels obviously are just, that's one category. There's a million different categories, because then later on you will teach a variety of adjectives that then are paired with those object labels, so like colors, size, etc. And then that now forms longer phrases. But right now, I think you're going from manding to tacting, which means you need to just have the child identify objects in the environment. And the way you do that is first having touch and then reward each one. That's correct. I'm getting into a lot of detail on how to do this great trial now, because obviously you will put you want to also discriminate and make sure that the child is doing this correctly. But these are steps that are in ABA, and this is how you expand language.
And I love that you answered that part of the question, but I think part of the question here that we hear a lot of times is that as you're prompting and teaching a child and you say, what is it? And then we'll often say, it's a, to lead to cup. But sometimes our kids will repeat the what is it?
Yeah.
So we say, what is it? And they say, what is it? And how do we get to the it's a cup?
Right. So I'll answer that. Yeah,
Okay.
but I think also you're right. I should go back and read what mom is saying here is that the child is echoing one-word phrases that she wants.
I see.
So she's
I got it wrong.
echoing, well, I did too. She's echoing the
Yes.
one-word phrases, and that's kind of where you have to fade out the, but you're fine right now. Like, don't worry about the fact. So what I'm seeing is, like, let's say child wants juice, and what you do is you hold the juice and you're saying juice, and then the child will say juice, right? So the way that you, I think that's what you're saying, and I think the way that you do this is you start to fade yourself out, fade the verbal out, so that you'll say, like, I want and then the child will start to say juice. So you shape yourself out of the picture. The vocal imitation turns into just a verbal request from the child. And the same for tacting, for anything else. You fade yourself out. Initially, it's okay to echo, and then over time, you fade yourself out. And that's how we get language.
One of the things I was talking about with parents last night is that, you know, when my son was doing ABA, we didn't have centers, which I wish we'd had centers, right? But we only had it at home, and I, you know, because Logan Shepherd's mom had introduced me to everything, and she was like, get a nanny cam, get a, you know, a baby cam, and she was like, and watch everything that they do. Not out of a sense of paranoia, but that too. Like, then you have that comfort of knowing you're watching and you can see what happens. But I learned so much.
Absolutely.
And you would watch 7 different behavior technicians do something in 7 different ways and see that there is like no absolute one way, but that there's ways. And the finesse and the creativity in being able to get a child to, you know, to get to the reinforcer. It was a fascinating thing. And I was recommending to parents that, for instance, that they, because everybody's working, right?
Yeah.
But that they do sessions on the weekend and watch.
Yeah, you should watch,
And
honestly.
watch so that you learn.
Yeah.
Because, and if you see 3 different BTs do it in 3 different ways and you go, oh, like, I get it. And then you find your particular way. But I would just have a flashback. Always when you're talking about these things, I have a flashback of a certain person saying, I want, you know, for my son to be able to finish the rest of the word, and learning so much from that. About, I could say the first sound to prompt him, and then I can stop that later on. Finesse,
And
brilliant.
also just starting, like, the more, you have to realize, the more familiar, this is what fluency is, right? The more familiar the child is with those specific object labels, like juice, water, whatever it is they want, the easier it is for them to request those things. So it's not always, you know, you have to work on the actual object labels, and then the whole process of requesting, labeling, etc., becomes a lot easier.
There we go. Stephen has written in and said, hi everyone, my son does ABA, speech, and OT. Should a child psychologist be a part of our team, and what age is appropriate for a child to see a psychologist? My son is 6.
Stephen, so that's a really interesting question. I don't think anyone's ever asked that of me. So I am a child psychologist. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I trained in psychology because when I was going to school, it was before the world of ABA even existed. And then, of course...
You helped create it.
Yeah, we kind of did help create it. But I don't know that. It depends on your child's issues. I don't really get psychologists involved unless there are other comorbidities that are, and of course, okay, so let's...
Tell us what
comorbidity means, like other issues, like, for instance, depression, anxiety, other disorders that exist, and if the child's level of comprehension is adequate to do any kind of talk therapy. Because ABA is, I guess, so ABA's root is that it falls under psychology, right? It used to be called behavior modification. It's part of learning psychology. Learning is a version of psychology. It's based on behavioral psychology and the theory that any behavior that is reinforced is going to increase, any behavior that is not reinforced is going to decrease through life. And that's called operant conditioning. It's a theory that falls under psychology. But with our kids, they don't have a lot of language when they start. And most of psychological treatment requires a level of comprehension of language. So for instance, even when your psychologist works with a very, very young child, they'll tell them, for instance, draw a picture of your family. Like that's something that you would do initially to understand a little bit more about what's in the child's psyche. That's a lot of language for a child on the spectrum. So if your child doesn't have language, it becomes really important to build the language up first, and that's what ABA will do, so that you can kind of enter the cognitive realm of the child, so that you can enter their thoughts, so that you can understand a little bit more, so the child can actually express to you what they're thinking, feeling, what they're afraid of, what hurts, all those types of things. And with autism, that is often not the case. Often when you're looking at a child who's 6, they're not able to express those things. So having a psychologist as part of the team isn't that helpful in the beginning. That said, psychologists can be helpful in assessing. So, for instance, in the very beginning, when you get your child's diagnosis, you might want to talk to a psychologist to do a series of standardized tests, assessments. Only psychologists are licensed to do those. And those might be kind of helpful. Like, honestly, language testing, neurocognitive testing, testing that tells you kind of the areas that your child is very strong, very weak, like their memory is fantastic, but their problem solving is not so good. Those types of things you can get from a psychologist who does testing. It isn't necessary. If you have a plan, I always tell parents, because there's just so much on their plate, if your child's doing ABA and is moving forward, then let it be for a little while. Just make sure that you do a lot of ABA, because that, I want to touch on that over and over again, because a lot of times people think like, my child's doing ABA, and then it ends up they're doing 4 hours a week or 6 hours a week or 10 hours a week. Not enough. And if your child is 6 years old, this is when you should be doing a lot of ABA so that your child is learning rapidly. The whole concept right now is just teaching your child all the just concrete things that they didn't learn before, and then you go to abstract things that they didn't learn before, and then you can do other things. But right now it's just about teaching a lot of things.
There we go. I want to acknowledge Kylie wrote in and said thank you about the prompting. She said, yes, you got it. We will work on fading the verbal prompt. I like the tip you gave about giving the first sound of a word. We'll try that. Wow. Thanks so much for your time. Thank you, Kylie. Andrea has written in and said that her son says, call off the lights. Oh. And I correct him and say, turn off the lights. And he corrects it, but then he does it again. He overgeneralizes with everything. Will this always happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's like when you learn a new language. That's basically the same thing. Yeah. You will make some mistakes in the beginning. It's not always going to be, sometimes he'll pick up the exact phrases correctly, and sometimes he won't. So when you are prompting him, just what I would do, I don't know, do we know Andrea's son's age? What I would do though, Andrea, is
He's young. He's not yet in kindergarten.
Yeah. What I would do is... 4, yeah. What I would do is I would just say, instead of prompting the whole thing when he's incorrect, I would stand in front of it, don't turn off the light, but prompt him with a t, so that he starts saying turn off. Like, reduce your prompt significantly, because a lot of times we think we have to prompt again and again and again, and it's because we're over prompting and we're giving away, so the child doesn't put any effort into it. He will be very motivated because you won't be turning them off. And as soon as he says the turn off the light, then you can turn them off.
Oh, I have to say, I love how our kids assimilate language. And it is just like learning a language.
Yeah.
And Jem, when he was little, he would always refer to the dishwasher as the machine that washes dishes.
Yeah.
And I said to him, honey, it's the dishwasher. And he said, when he was old enough, he said to me, well, a dishwasher can be a person, or a dishwasher can be a machine.
There you go, there you go.
So I'm specifying that it's the machine that's washing the dishes, not you.
That.
And that made my whole head go
love
whoop,
that
whoop,
so
whoop,
much.
whoop, whoop. But he understood when I said the dishwasher, he understood. If I would say put the dish in the dishwasher, he understood. And he said, you like to be imprecise with your language.
Exactly.
Is what he said to me. I like to be more precise.
That's so good.
Isn't that amazing?
That's so amazing.
And it's very specific. Call off the lights.
Yeah.
is so much more urgent than turn off the lights.
Yeah.
And so I love that you're like,
Yeah.
he will be motivated
Because
to.
it's so interesting because we don't realize so much of our language actually is imprecise. Like he's absolutely right.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's totally right. You know, in some other languages that I speak, there are words that describe three completely different things,
Yeah.
the same word.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we get used to it because we read contextual cues so fast.
Yeah.
But for our kids who are learning this stuff later, it's the hardest thing because you have to classify it in multiple ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff. Maggie says, my 10-year-old still has a hard time doing greetings and partings. How can I help him? He only says good morning, hello, or bye when prompted. When prompted. Thank you for your response.
So he has a hard time doing greetings and partings. 10 years old, great. So I love when our kids get a little bit older and they are able to maybe read or just pay attention to visual cues. Personally, I find it a lot easier to use visual cues. So if your child is able to, I would write a greeting and let me just see how, yeah, so he only says good morning, hello, or bye.
When
and you're
prompted.
When prompted. Okay, so, and you're just trying to get him to say good morning, hello, or bye without a prompt. Is that what it is? So one of the things that we do is you go from a verbal prompt to a visual prompt, and then you fade out, and that tends to be easier. So if you can pair your verbal prompt with the visual, so a written word that says hello, and what you're doing is you're showing hello and saying hello to prompt him, and then gradually you will stop saying hello and you'll have the visual, and then you'll flash it over time, and then you won't even flash it, you'll just barely flash it. We had a therapist one time who was genius at doing this, and it worked. And what she had done was she faded it even further by eventually getting to a point where it was a blank piece of paper. It didn't even say hello. It was just the action of having a visual would remind the child of what was on there. Yeah, it was really interesting.
Fascinating.
So it's just a matter of fading the prompt. And I would focus on one at a time, right? So it's very confusing because when we do hello and goodbye and all these different things, you focus at one at a time. I also wonder, Maggie, if he's confusing the hello and goodbye because coming and going aren't clear to him. So maybe you can let us know if my advice was helpful. If not, elaborate a little bit and we can talk more about it.
Can we talk about skills?
Yeah,
Because
of
in
course.
skills, there's a lesson called salutations.
Yes,
which is
there is.
exactly this, and it talks about all the different ways and
to teach, yeah.
to teach this, and skillsforautism.com if you're interested in
And there you
that.
go.
And there it is, because Chris is amazing. There we go. Autism Journey with Elijah. This is an interesting one that I had not heard before. I have a question. For children who have trouble speaking or are nonverbal, is it true that teaching Braille to teach them to talk can help them speak, or is that a myth? I've never heard it.
No, I haven't. Not really. I might have one child over the years who learned Braille, but that child didn't become vocal after. But the concept of teaching Braille is pretty much the same as teaching sign language and or iconic language, and all of it in some cases does actually lead to vocalization. So it's possible. I don't know if, I'm just trying to go through the steps in my head, and it is possible because essentially you're using a textural type of thing like Braille, which is texture, like
Right.
and you are now pairing that with vocal. If you want to end up with vocal, you always have to, so here's how it works. The other stimulus, so whether it's Braille or sign language or icons, pictures or so on, has to be a prompt that is paired with vocalization. If you do it on its own, then that becomes the mode of communication. If you pair it with vocalization, and if the child has the ability to vocalize, then it is possible to later on fade out the Braille. Also, Shannon, this kind of brings me back to the whole concept of, for kids who have a very hard time expanding their language, brings me back to the whole concept of the letterboarding,
Yeah,
right?
that's the first
And
thing I thought of.
yeah, exactly. Because these are all alternate ways of communicating. And I absolutely, I mean, what works for a child works for a child. And the
Yeah.
big thing for me is just helping every child communicate.
Yeah.
How they do it doesn't matter.
Well, and we're learning a lot. In the
Yeah.
last 10 years, what we've learned about, first of all, we've learned that there's how many different, at least different types of autism? Is it 17 or 23
Yeah,
that we've
yeah.
learned? And that
Yeah.
each one has different hallmarks with it.
Yep.
And we're seeing that some kids have apraxia and some
Yes,
kids don't.
absolutely.
And then we see that some kids have a motor issue that isn't, I don't think, apraxia, that literally is a motor planning issue.
Yes.
That those kids with a letterboard sometimes are successful and they can't go right to a keyboard.
Right, right.
So there are all these different things. I happen to know that that in this case the child does have a visual issue,
Mm-hmm.
that there is a disability there visually, and so maybe Braille would be the ticket.
Maybe, absolutely, because now you're depending on feeling, touch.
And maybe that would spark
Yep,
more.
yep.
I mean, it's a fascinating thing. Maggie wanted us to know about the 10-year-old that was having a hard time with greetings and pairings, that the advice was helpful. He does not get confused by hello or goodbye because he is
Dependent.
Yes.
So Maggie, I think you just have to like pick one, like let's say hello, and don't like you can either try the visual prompt, which holding up something that says hello and then fade that, but also just go. We used to do this, like we'd stand in front of the child and just go like this after a while, like aren't you supposed to say something? And then the child like will go through their repertoire and come up with the thing that they most likely should be saying. And again, use the the fading, so he or good, like that. So just to say the first part of it so that the child gets started. And then fade it to this so that you are waiting for the child and actually keep the child there, until they actually do say hello. This is such an important thing for kids to interrupt what they're doing, look up, and actually greet when someone comes in the door is kind of a important step.
Dahlia says, hello, my son is 3, and for the last month he starts crying as soon as the therapist shows up for a session. He is receiving 26 hours of ABA per week. There has not been a change in the therapist, programs, or hours of therapy. What could be the problem? Of a 3-hour session, he might work with a therapist for only 30 minutes. Is he receiving a fair ABA? Is it too many hours per week?
How is he receiving only 30 minutes? Is that because he's crying the whole time?
That's how I read it. But tell us.
Okay, so that could be that he is, okay. So clearly he's trying to escape the tasks. He's trying to escape doing ABA. So I would try to, first of all, you should be immediately talking to the BCBA who is in charge of the case, and saying, this used to be a positive experience, it's not any longer. And this goes back to the being fair.
Yeah, she says because he's crying.
Yeah. So something's not, there's just not enough reward for him in the therapy program for whatever reason. There's a lot of reasons that could be the case, and I'll try to go through some of them. One is the material is too hard. So if the material is too hard, he won't be accessing his rewards because he's failing. So that's one. In that case, they would need to make it a little bit easier and prompt him more, etc. Second one is he's bored. The material is too easy. So you got to watch for that. And if that's the case, then we have to be a little bit more interesting and offer him an opportunity to move forward faster. Third is they're just not reinforcing. So there's just not rewards that are meaningful. That could, on its own, be a multitude of things. For instance, the rewards they're using, he could have satiated. That means he has access to them during the day, or he's just not interested in them. Rewards change, right? Like today you might want cookies, tomorrow you couldn't care less, you want to listen to music. Whatever it is, the rewards need to be alternated. In fact, a lot really, really, really good therapy, they should be doing a kind of choice type of thing at the very beginning, where they will ask the child, what do you want to work for? They'll propose a series of rewards, and the child can select what they want. Every set of trials, you do that. You ask the child what they want to work for. So that's very important. You said that the therapists have not changed, so that's good, because it gives me the impression that things were positive before and now they've become negative. Perhaps it would be a good idea to observe therapy and see what is going on. Is it a reaction to one therapist, or it doesn't matter who walks in the door and he will start to tantrum? These are things you need to kind of, if it's one therapist, then you kind of want to be a little, you want to just test out what's going on with that one therapist. If it doesn't matter, and if it's anyone who's about to do therapy, then that tells you that he's just not enjoying the therapy itself. And honestly, it should become more enjoyable. Make sure that, like right now, what's happening is he tantrums and he gets to avoid the therapy. That is not a good thing. That's not what you want. What they should do right away is, instead of tantruming, if he asks for a break, either vocally or just indicates that he wants a break, they should give him a small break. I would immediately probably chop up the therapy and do shorter segments that are very reinforcing. Whenever things become like this, you kind of reverse the process. So this is how ABA works. You make a demand and then you reward, right? In the very beginning, the demands are very small and the rewards are very big. Over time, you change that so that the demands are lengthier and harder and the rewards are less and less, and they're kind of like what the environment allows, right? But in situations like this, you reverse that and you make the demands easier and shorter and the rewards higher again, and then you start to reverse it again. Sometimes our kids it's just not fair. They don't feel rewarded enough. And remember, ABA depends on reward. It depends on reinforcement. So if the child's not being reinforced enough, you got to figure out how to reverse that cycle.
I want to acknowledge, and forgive me, I was looking up so that I would have the information, but I could have just asked you. Andrea said, wait, 17 or 23 types of ASD? Where can I read about this information? So the title of the study that I was referring to is Identification and Analysis of Behavioral Phenotypes in Autism Spectrum Disorder via Unsupervised Machine Learning, and your name is on that study.
Yeah, so that was one of our studies. And we found 16 phenotypes, but the truth is there are probably more subphenotypes. That study was intended to be a first study.
Yeah.
And the phenotypes are just based on patterns of learning. We were only looking, what we did is we looked at patterns of learning based on our data and our skills platform. So when skills is the curriculum that we built for CARD many years ago, and what we measure, it's teaching of a number of different lessons, and what we measure, the outcome of skills, is how fast are the kids learning. That's like the most important outcome, is have we done things in a way that the child's learning, and the pattern that children learn is different. So based on that data, we were able to look at 16 phenotypes. That study was supposed to go into further analysis, because phenotypes can be defined on multiple different ways. This was just based on the way they learn. You could have phenotypes. Phenotypes just means subtypes, by the way, guys. So you could have phenotypes based on response to medication. You could have phenotypes based on comorbid other illnesses. You can have multiple different types of genetic phenotypes are called genotypes.
Right.
So you can basically have different subdivisions. Not so important to each of you, but what is important is just knowing that there are different subtypes of autism. Kids are different.
I think what's important to know is that people like you are looking at the fact that, and you guys were doing this anyway, but now the research was being done, and I think will happen again. Pandemic didn't help, let's say that.
Yes.
But the idea that we could get to the point where somebody could look at your child and say, okay, you are in this category, and what we have seen work in the past is this, and fast track. Right. And already, though, you got to the point where one of the things that I learned at one point is that there is a group of kids that, for instance, and I remember this one because I was like, oh, that was my kid.
Yeah.
That kids who have a visual thing going on, that they had a really hard time catching a ball. They took longer to learn how to catch a ball
Right.
than the other kids, and they tended to bump into furniture. They had a
Right,
harder time
right.
riding bike, harder time learning to read. And one of the things that they learned was, because for us, we said, forget the ball. He's not going to play baseball. Forget the ball. Let's move on to the other things. But what the research showed was that if more time had been spent on catching the ball early, that it was easier for everything after that. That's brilliant.
Yeah, yeah.
That is absolutely brilliant.
It is. It's really cool when you come up with those types of like specific groups that
Yes.
kids can fit into. The problem with autism, honestly, Shannon, is that it's so different and there's so many components to
Sure.
it. So not only are the kids different subtypes, but they have different things going on in their environments.
Of course. Yes.
Which then impacts them, right? So, like, let's say a child of the same exact, like they have similar learning patterns.
Yeah.
One of them is exposed to a very enriched environment of learning, and the other one is not. There's just so much going. One of them is given medication that helps reduce their anxieties, and the other one is not.
Yes,
There's just so much impact on the child and so many variables.
But
So
it
it's very
makes me
hard.
sleep better knowing that brilliant people like you are working
well,
on
thank
it.
you.
You know what I mean? And I think it gives all of us hope, yes, where we go,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
I'm so
absolutely.
glad you guys are working on that in a room that I don't know about.
Absolutely.
Joanne has joined us late, but we always love it when you make it here. And I owe you an amends. I have a code I have to send you. I've not forgotten you. And she says, hello from the suburbs. Thank you for all that you guys do. And thank you for all that you do. And we're running out of time, but Rocking Autism Journey says, thank you for sharing to Autism Journey with Elijah. Yes, because we're all happy that you were just sharing your face off during this, and it really meant so much to us. Kylie wants to know if a child has, say, 20 hours of ABA a week, and we are focusing on language and getting the child to speak and behavior, is it worth it adding an hour each week with speech therapist program? Oh my gosh, this could take the rest of our lives to talk about. Because Kylie,
Yeah.
remind me, did you say that your child was 3?
So the thing is, Kelly, that it just it depends. I don't. So there are sometimes other issues that we're not dealing with within ABA, and a speech therapist might be very helpful. For instance, is the child? Here's an example: is the child articulating words correctly? If not, then it's actually not a bad idea. Excuse me, to add a speech therapist, because your ABA team will focus on increasing language, and the speech person will focus on correct articulation or pronunciation of words. So it really just depends, or is the child lacking certain sounds? Speech therapists are really good at getting those, the tongue to move in the correct way to produce sounds. But in terms of just adding language, adding speech, I think your ABA team is doing an adequate job.
But at only 20 hours a week.
Yeah, and I don't,
And
again,
they're
I
four
don't.
and a half.
4.5, yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, if you can increase that, it would be better. Let's put it that way.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I
I
love
hate putting
speech.
pressure on families because they have so much going on, but the more you can
Yes.
give your child, the better.
And I love that as a clinician, you're in that spot. I'm not a clinician, I'm a parent. And so I can say to you guys, oh my gosh, stop saying no to things that you can only get funding right now.
Yeah.
And you can only get funding at 4.5 for all the hours that he needs
Yep.
for ABA. And
Speech and everything. It doesn't hurt.
But you can keep on doing an hour of speech when he's 8, like
Yeah.
to clean up diction and things like that. And they'll give you that hour of speech when he's 8. They're not going to give you 30, 40 hours of.
So the child is lacking some sounds, and so it's not a bad idea at this point to add the speech as well, because
Okay,
it'll help.
but
especially
I
with
also want you to
sounds.
add more ABA.
Yeah, just fill his time.
Yes.
His time.
Yes, because here's the thing. I think as parents we understand this. Right now, insurance at that age should, if you fight for it, fund you. Now, if you've had 2 years of ABA and you settled for 20, it's going to be an uphill battle. But if you were walking in the door at 4,
Yeah.
your insurance company, if you fight with them, will give you 40 hours of ABA. Now,
Correct.
ask yourself why.
Yeah.
Why would the insurance company pay for that?
Right.
Why do they give that to some people? Because the research is there.
Right.
So if you and your child is 3 or 4 decide to take less than that, they got away with something.
Right.
And
right.
I don't know why we would let them get away with something.
Right.
That's my point to parents. Don't let insurance gyp your kid out of something that they will not give you when he's 6. They will only give it to you right now.
Right.
That's my philosophy.
Got it. It's a good one.
Sorry.
It's a good one.
I hate to think that insurance gets to go, oh, good, I get to take that money back.
I know.
And the kid didn't
I
get
know.
it.
I know.
Because
I
the
know.
parents don't know, because we're all so considerate of, we know you have so many things to do. No, I think parents need to know this, the reason why insurance will pay for it is because that's what the studies showed to be the most effective. Not because we're trying to feather anybody's nest or the therapist wants to get paid more. That has nothing to do with anything. The reason why insurance will pay for it is because that's what's shown to be effective.
Yes, absolutely.
And they've lost lawsuits where they didn't give that to families. Families sued them and they had to pay billions of dollars because the research showed that's what was effective.
That's right. That's right.
I will get off my soapbox
No,
now.
no, it's really
You're
good.
the expert.
I just think, yeah, I mean, I think that it is very, very important for families to know that every hour matters.
It does.
And everything you can do to increase the hours of ABA in particular, but also speech, and in some cases OT, just
Yes.
enriched environment. That's kind of what I was
Yeah,
talking
do it all.
about.
Take it all.
Take it all.
Take it all. Do as much as you absolutely can. Okay, we are running out of time here, but I wanted to stop to say a couple of things. First of all, we got a couple of things that are coming up that are in the hopper. A really important event. There's a charity, Autism Care Today, that Dr. Granpeesheh founded many years ago. How old is that? Do you have any idea?
I think it's about 20 years. I should actually look it up and see it. It might be our 20th year.
Oh my gosh, we should know
Yeah,
that. But
yeah.
what a wonderful charity that gives grants to families for things that families need.
Yeah.
And so when they have an open grant phase, families get to write in, and we will let you know when the next open grant phase is. I think one's coming up.
Yeah.
And you get to write in and say, my child needs an iPad. My
Yep,
child
yep.
is an eloper and I need help with safety equipment.
Yep.
My child is older and needs a computer with this program because he wants to study design, and that's the only way that we're going to be able to afford it because we've been busy doing other things.
Right.
And the grants are reviewed by a grant committee, and up to $5,000 is granted to as many people as can be afforded. So we always want to fundraise so we can
Yes.
afford to give out more grants. So you have the lovely second annual All Ghouls Gala. Do you want to tell them about that event?
Yes, sure. So it is a Halloween event that is in the Los Angeles area in particular. It's in the Woodland Hills Country Club in Woodland Hills, California, which is the northern section of LA. And we are very excited about it. There will be lots and lots of fun things going on at this. Obviously, costumes required. It's on the 28th of October coming up. It's our big annual event, and I hope that a lot of you guys will sign up. And if you know
If you're
anyone in the area, please come. And please, the tickets are very affordable, I think. They're $125 each, and we're very much looking forward to selling out. We're getting closer, I think. Yeah. It's at, we will probably sell out at about 400 people, so.
There we go. And it is star-studded. There are awards that are given every year. The Lending Your Voice Award, which is given to a person or an entity who has been instrumental in elevating the voices of individuals on the spectrum.
That's right.
So this year, the people we're announcing thus far, Dr. Temple Grandin, who will be in attendance.
Can't
so
wait.
If you ever wanted to go to a costume Halloween party with Dr. Temple Grandin, here's your opportunity.
It'll be great.
It's going to be off the chain, or off the hook. What do we say now? I don't know. I'm so old. Joe Mantegna, the wonderful, beautiful, fabulous soul of a man actor from things like The Godfather and Searching for Bobby Fischer and Criminal Minds, he is getting an award. And Ariva Martin, who we've had on the show before, who is you've seen her on The Doctors. She's a lawyer, an advocate and a mom and amazing. They are our honorees that we're announcing thus far. So they will be there. Also, celebrities who love them will be there. And so if you want to hobnob with those kinds of people and be there with Dr. Granpeesheh, who will be in costume, and I will be there in costume, and a lot of the other people.
Oh, Johnny, that's so nice.
Yes, Johnny said we can't if we can't attend because we live in Pennsylvania. How can we support?
That's so lovely.
Well, really, there's 4 ways that you can support. Do you want to talk about that? You want me to talk about that?
Please.
Well, one of the things, if you know a business who wants to support, we have sponsors, but we are looking for more sponsors, and we're looking for stuff. We have a wonderful swag bag that we give out, and if somebody has something that's little with their branding on that they would like to put in our swag bag, we will entertain that, and they get a tax letter for the full value of whatever they give us. We do need 400 of whatever those small items are.
Yeah, or close to 400, as many as they can.
That's true. Or if they have something big that
Yeah.
they would like to donate, like I have some things on my wish list of big things that I would like donated, because we have one of those auctions where
Kinda
it's
silent, yeah.
but it's like a group, it's like a table of items,
Yes.
that are all branded, and we will feature the branding, and it's in the same room where Temple Grandin will be, so it's kind of a good like spot to be in. But there'll be 5 of those tables with different things, and people buy raffle tickets. And each person puts a raffle ticket, however many raffle tickets they want, in whichever thing. And at the end, we will pick one raffle ticket that wins everything on each of those 5 tables. And we'd like some big, voluptuous items, but if they have something that's smaller that they just want to donate one. So that's one way that you can support. Obviously, if you were in the area, we do have some spots still for volunteers, but we will still take donations to go towards specific grants for the night. And we love it when people share. You should be seeing a lot more stuff in social media today and yesterday and in the coming days, that if you just share and tell other people about it, that's helping the event as well.
And you can also purchase tickets and give them, we can donate them to other people on your behalf.
Oh, absolutely. I didn't
Because
think
there's a
about
lot
that
of
one.
people who want to come and
Yes.
just don't really have the ability to pay for the $125
Yep.
ticket. So that's another gift that
Yes.
we'd be happy to give people.
And if you do that, just put in the note, please give this to another autism parent so that they
Yeah.
can come. A lot of people have done that in the past. We love that. I also want to say that Andrea wrote in when we were talking about the 40-hour thing. She said, my son is living proof of this. He is in a 40-hour week program and has been for a year. He is talking and has decreased a lot of his behaviors.
Right.
So, and that's the whole thing, right?
Awesome.
In a nutshell, we like progress. We're out of time now. We're past time. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for being here.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Chris, for an amazing show. And next week, I think we're going to be adding some more shows back. And I think we're here with you next week.
I might be here next week. Yes,
Okay,
I
we'll
am
see.
here. Actually,
Okay.
I am, because I fly the next day.
Okay,
Yes.
all right.
Yes.
But reruns for the rest of this week as we get everything back on track. But next week, we'll be back with Autism Live. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.
Bye, everyone.
Don't forget, you can watch Ask Dr. Doreen live every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time. We hope to see you there.